Galen. I'm the Rhinestone Queen. You know, of all the hundreds of costumes I've made, I have never made a costume that I used the pattern exactly as it was designed in the book. I always take a pattern and then modify it to do what it is I want it to do. These are a couple of my favorites. I use these two a lot, these quick sew patterns. I also have this McCall's pattern. I'm going to use that today. But you can use really literally any leotard pattern and adapt it to whatever design you're trying to make. So that's what I want to walk you through today, is how to make a pattern. The first thing we have to do when getting ready to cut a pattern is to make sure we get the measurements right, because if it doesn't fit, it doesn't matter how pretty it is. We have to have it fitting correctly. So I'm going to assume that my dancer has a 32 bust, a 25 waist, and 36 hips. So every pattern has the measurements somewhere on it. It'll either be on the back of the pattern page or it'll be on the fold of the envelope right here. This particular pattern, a 32 bust, falls in the extra small range. 25 waist falls in small, and 36 hips falls in small. So I need to cut this pattern on an extra small bust and a small waist and small hip. All you're going to have to do is know where the lines are for that. So if you notice, every pattern has a size, like if you can see, it says extra small right here. This line is the extra small line. This is the small, this is medium, and this is large. And the pattern's marked every line that's on the pattern has a marking to show you where the different sizes are. So you're going to follow that line. If I'm doing an extra small top, I'll follow the top. I want to make sure I get around the bust on the extra small. If her waist is small, that's this second line. So I'm going to actually have to come out here and then meet the small line right there. And then follow the small line the rest of the way down the pattern. And that'll ensure a good fit. Sometimes you have to lengthen a pattern. I know a lot of dancers are tall and thin. A lot of the ones that come and get a custom costume, they do that because they can't find a costume to fit them properly. This line right here is your shorten or lengthen line. So if I need to lengthen the torso, if my girl has a longer torso, I'm going to need to cut this right here, and then you can actually split the pattern apart, and you just need to leave a little gap, and you can cut it on there. If you watch my Making a Leotard part 1, I cover that in a little more detail. The other thing you need to look at is the mark. This says center front, place on fold. So when you cut your fabric, you're going to actually fold your fabric in half and then place the pattern, this edge, on the folded edge, so that if it's folded, when you open it, you have a whole piece. So the whole front, because if you think of the front of any garment, unless it's one-shouldered, the right side and the left side are identical. So that's how you achieve that identical thing on the right and the left side, by cutting it on the fold. So when you open it, it's perfectly identical on both sides. Okay, so here's the design that I've come up with. I'm going to use white lycra for a base. So the body of the leotard will be white lycra, and then I've got some beautiful lace applique that I'm going to put here along this V, this deep V plunge. The deep V plunge is going to have a nude mesh in the back, and I'm also going to put nude mesh insets on the sides. And I'll do crisscross straps in the back. It ought to be a really, really pretty costume when we're done. I've pulled 2 pattern pieces from my envelope. I've got the front of the body and I've got the back. And so I'm going to get started by cutting out the front. Well, at least tracing the front, not cutting yet. So I'll put that under my tracing paper. And I think I mentioned before in other videos that this paper that I use is the same paper that doctors use in their office on their exam table. And you can get it on Amazon. I line up the line of the pattern, the edge to the edge of the paper, because I know that that's a perfectly straight line on the edge of the paper, and I'll line up this perfectly straight line there. And then I'm going to just pin it to secure it in place. I only have to pin it in a couple places. I just don't want it to move on me while I'm tracing things out. So that's my first step, is to trace out the pattern that's there. Also, to help me orient myself when I'm cutting things out and make sure I don't like drop it too low, this particular pattern has a mark for like a little rounded waist if you were to do a skirt inset into the leotard. We're not going to be doing that. So I'm going to go ahead and mark where that line is. It's a little dotted line on the pattern, so I'll make it a dotted line here. And that's going to correspond to the dotted line that's on the back of the pattern. So now I'm going to go ahead and trace out the pattern back, and then we'll get started modifying. Okay, so we're ready to modify this front pattern. Now this is going to be a halter. Right now it's made to be like, it's ready to have sleeves go in. See, there's a place for the sleeves to get set in here. We're not going to have sleeves. It's going to be a halter. One of the things that's important is you want to make sure you keep this under the armpit line. You don't want to impact that, because if you do, you'll end up showing body parts you don't want to show. So I would make sure you keep that under the armpit line. I'm going to want my halter neck to actually come, gosh, all the way to here, because I want it to come almost to a spaghetti strap. So I want it to come all the way to here. I know I'm going to keep that under the armpit line, so I'll start about here, and then I'll just draw a gentle line with ever so slight a curve to meet right there. So I'll be cutting it out on this green line right here. This is not going to happen. So this part's going to go away. So there's my halter neck. The next thing I need to do is make my V. And I know that I want my V. Here's the waistline, right? You can see where the pattern dips in right here at the waist. So I want my V to stop about at the waistline. I don't want to be too daring. So I'll stop at the waistline right there. And then I just draw a straight line going up. I might have to curve it a little bit because I want to make sure the bust is completely covered, which would be about here. I want to make sure. So I'll hit that line right there, and then I just draw a line, meet it there, and then I'm going to go up and meet it up here. I actually want it to come all the way here, so there we go. So here's my line that I'm going to follow for my nude inset. So there's the nude inset. We're cutting this off. This pattern is now modified for the style that we drew. See how simple it is? So here's the pattern back. We know we're going to have spaghetti straps. So this whole section is going to end up not being used. But again, I want to get that under the armpit part because I don't want to show parts that I don't want. So my line is going to go right about here so I can have the under the armpit part. And this is the center of the back, right? And this is the waistline. And I know that dip's going to, oh, I forgot to draw my insets. So I'm going to want my pattern, and this is that little dip I told you about. I absolutely don't want to go below that. I actually want to go a little higher than that. I want it to be almost at waist level. So I'm going to go right here. I'm going to drop my back right there. And then I just draw in the curve. One other thing I do on the back that's a little different than what most people do. My friend Dana taught me this trick. You know, our rear ends have a curve on them, right? They're not straight across, and you can see this line is fairly straight. So what I do is I put a bubble butt in it, and when you put the little bubble, it gives the fabric has a place to go and cup the underneath of the rear end, and it gives you a much better fit. So just come up about 1.5 fingers above where it meets in the crotch, and start my line from there, and just come out and make a little bubble that's about 1/2 inch, and then rejoin the line. So you can see the little bubble that I made. I can't tell you the world of difference that one little thing makes in the fit on the leotard. The other thing I forgot to do on my top, and this happens, you know, you forget to do things. Remember, I wanted to do that little inset, the nude inset in the side, right? So it's okay if that nude inset plunges a little bit lower. I'm gonna go from the highest part of the hip. I'm gonna hit it right here in the hip is where I'm gonna start it, and I'm gonna go, the bust is gonna end about here. So that's where I'm gonna do my, I might have to go a little bit lower. I wanna have a pretty decent piece of nude. There we go. Sorry, there's so many green lines. This is actually, this outer green line is the one I'm gonna follow. It takes me a little while sometimes to get the curve exactly where I want, but that's the one I'm gonna follow. I wanna match that on the back side. So I'm gonna take this back pattern. Let me cut this excess away here. Take the back pattern. And remember, I told you these lines are gonna match up. So that's how I know how far down I go. So I can match that line to this line. And I know that I need to go to here. And then I can match this line to this line. And it's kind of hard to do because it's on a big curve. There we go. So I know my nude inset on the back is gonna go, and I'll make it go all the way to that piece so that it ends up, this is all nude. And that'll all be nude right there. So this piece is going to be nude. This is going to be white. And this is going to be white. On the front part, all of this whole section here is white. This is nude, and this is nude. So that's what we're gonna cut. I'm gonna go ahead and trim my pattern. I'm gonna show you a little secret. When you're getting ready to assemble, because we're working with different fabrics and they're actually going to just be top stitched, I want to make sure they go together the way that they were drawn on our pattern. So what I do, I've taken a piece of my pattern paper, folded it in half so that I have center. I'm going to go ahead and just stick this, I can stick it underneath our pattern underneath it. And then I'm going to trace it and cut it out so that I have a guide to use as a template when I'm putting my pieces back together, because you'll find it's going to make your job a lot easier. So I'm going to just go ahead, let me trace it. I don't have to trace the whole pattern, but I definitely want to trace this V. And I want to trace my inset. And then I can go ahead and cut it out. And I'm just following the lines of the pattern. I can see them just fine through this transparent fabric, this transparent paper. What I want to do now is show you some other options you have when you're designing your dance costume and how you can modify the pattern in other ways. I showed you how to do the inset. I showed you how to do a drop V. I want to show you how to do a camisole, a sweetheart neckline, and I'm also going to show you how to do a one shoulder design. So hopefully this helps you take this to the next level. I'm going to use this blue Sharpie, and I guess I'll start with the camisole because that's probably one of the most common. If I know, remember the rule, you want to keep this piece under the armpit because the bust is about here. So you want to cover that. If you drop the armhole, you risk showing some skin that you don't want to show. So you want to make sure you keep that armhole. So if I'm going to make a camisole, I need to have a point. So I'll just put it up here somewhere above that armhole. And now I just have to come up and meet my point. And then I pick how low I want it to go. Now when you're doing a camisole, I would suggest just rounding it. If you want a hard point in the middle, that's when we're going to want to do a sweetheart, and I'll show you how to do that as well. But there's my camisole. And that's going to look a lot like this particular costume. Now, only thing that one, the difference is I did a drop like I did with the one we made, the white one that we did. I did a drop, so it went from here straight down. You can make that happen anywhere you want. This one would be just a regular rounded camisole, you know, maybe for a younger child. Okay. The back of the camisole, by the way, is going to look just like the back of the other one that we did. Now, if I were to do a sweetheart, same thing. I want to come up above this, and I can come slightly around here, and then I'm going to want to have a hard point in the middle. So you want to make a definite point. So that way, and when you're doing a sweetheart, you're going to want to make this top part out of some sheer fabric. And so you make that out of sheer, or you make it out of a contrast fabric, and then you just top stitch the sweetheart part onto the netting or whatever you use. The red costume that you see in the picture, I used some nude mesh at the top, and then it gave the look of a strapless costume, even though of course that costume can't possibly be strapless and stay up while she dances. So that should work for you. Oh, let me show you the back to the sweetheart. Here's our back pattern. And we have to do something. If you notice on the back of the sweetheart costume, the red costume, it overlaps. It closes and it has a little overlap, and there's a closure there with some, I usually use hook and eye and Velcro or snaps. I'll always use a hook and eye, and then I use either snaps or Velcro to hold it closed. But the hook and eye is what's doing the yeoman's work. To do that, that costume was connected at the shoulder seam, right? The nude mesh, and this is all the nude mesh up here. What you have to do is extend, this is the center back seam right here. You have to go beyond the center back seam by about an inch and a half, probably more like an inch and a half. And you're gonna go there. Now we wanna make a low back costume. Most times just if you look at my Facebook page and look at pictures, you'll see most of the backs are low back. I just think that's so elegant and pretty. So I'm not gonna wanna go below this scary part. So I'll probably go about closer to waist. And then I'm just gonna draw a little semicircle on the back. There we go. And so this part would get cut out, and then there's your back. Now on that one, the nude mesh came up, so you use the same process you used on the earlier one we did, where part of this will be nude mesh probably from about right here, will be nude mesh up here, and then this bottom part will be your fabric color. So, you'll have to figure those things out, but it's pretty easy. So that's all you have to do. Okay, for a one shoulder design, you're going to want to take your pattern paper and fold it in half, and then trace your pattern onto your pattern paper. Use that fold mark to put on the place on fold seam on the pattern. And then you just trace out your pattern as normal. Okay, so I traced design, and I went ahead and turned it over and then copied that tracing on the opposite side. But now, and I drew that curved line in, but now here's my design. And if you can see, this fold line is a nice way to know where center is. So that helps you kind of eyeball where you're going with your design. Okay, so the one shoulder design in the picture, if you notice, it actually connects at the neck. So this piece is going to have to be intact at the neckline. So I've got to make my one shoulder come from here. When I go to the opposite side, remember where I want to land. I always want to land under that armpit. So I'll start from here because I need it to connect at the neckline. There we go. That's the one shoulder. So then you cut this part off, and now you can just place this on a single wide piece of fabric. If, let's say, instead of doing that design, you wanted to do a one shoulder design where it's one shoulder and it comes to a camisole on the other side, that's fine too. You could just do like we did with the other one, draw your camisole in. Might have to make it come up a little higher so you have a place to go. So you draw your camisole in, and then you do your one shoulder design. And I just kept it a little further apart so you could see the difference. But you can make that however you want it to be. You'll notice on my site, on my Facebook page, you'll see some costumes that have color blocking. If you want to do color blocking, what I suggest is that you cut your entire leotard out of sheer, and then you cut your color blocks and lay it on top, pin them in, and then sew them. And that gives you a nice color block look. So there's a bunch of options. With those options, hopefully you're good to go to get some things going. I'll cover sleeves and skirting and trim in videos to come in the future. Thanks so much for joining me today. I hope this was informative. Please, as always, leave me comments, questions. I'd love to know if you like the video, what you want to see in the future. Be in touch and like my page on Facebook and, of course, this YouTube channel. So I'd love to see you back again. Thanks for joining me.